This is a video about guineas, also called Guinea Fowl, and a little bit of facts, information, how to raise them, what kind they are, and the colors, etc. I got known back years ago for raising guineas. Guinea fowl they're not chickens. I always classified everything into three categories: poultry, game birds, and waterfowl. Guinea fowl belong more to the game bird section because of the nutritional requirements and other things. Now, guineas are a little different also in the fact that you can have guineas with poultry. They've got a pretty good resistance to disease, etc. And with guineas, you can also have them with peafowl, turkeys, pheasants. I don't recommend it though because guineas are aggressive, and so pretty much all game fowl are aggressive. Guineas don't just mate by display like a pheasant or a turkey or a peafowl. Guineas, more or less, they choose a mate, and it's not for life, it's for the season. Occasionally, they may change mates, but it's not usual. If you see two guineas running after each other and they're just a fly, that's how they end up. The male that wins this race generally wins the rights to breed the female, and it's usually a female that they're actually chasing each other over. Now, there's three basic colors of guineas that they are, if you run them all back. One is the pearl. You have the white, which the white will show no specks, no dots. It's also called the white African. It's important to know that irregardless of the name, sometimes you'll hear French guinea fowl. They all hail from Africa. Then you also have the lavender. And those are your basic three colors. From that, through selective breeding, they've come up with all these different colors. Some I'm not sure I actually agree with, such as the pinto and the pied. Pied is what we used to call splash years ago. And we had, back at the peak of my breeding, we had a lot of guineas. Now, the guineas aren't like old English fowl. As far as being able to sex a guinea fowl, there's all kinds of different things and theories people have. The only 110% true way to sex a female is only a female can do the pack rack. Old farmers used to say that a thief broke into the hen house to steal some chickens, and there was a guinea in there, and the guinea said, "Not me, not me, not me." They can both make this sound, even though they're attributed only to a guinea fowl or male. They both make the same sound. The only difference is only the female can make this sound. That's the pack rack. As far as this, you cannot go by the comb and the wattle, or by the wattles. They're saying the wattles will be pointed and they'll be larger on a male, smaller and rounder on a female. That just doesn't work. That's not 100%. Bent sexing, even the Japanese, who are great at sexing, cannot sex a guinea fowl that way. So they're just not accurate. Like, this should be a male. And you can tell, let's see if I can get bigger. This is the ear. Okay, on the male, the ear will be lower and farther from the eye than what it will be a female. This is a pair. You can see his, and it's lower. Hers is a little closer and a little higher. That's pretty much 100% way to tell. But you have to be real observant and have to be real still in order to do that. Another way to tell is by the way their back end is shaped. This, if you'll notice, is all one piece versus this has a hump in the middle, and then it's got, I used to call them runners. And what it is those flat spots allow the male to mount the female. The males don't have that. This is a male. That, again, is another 100% way of sexing. So let's do the eggs now. The eggs, here it is compared to chicken eggs. The guinea eggs will be more pointed than the chicken egg, and it's going to be a real hard shell. They can come speckled, they can come brown, they can come whitish colored. Whoever done these eggs is wrong. This one appears to be upside down and that one's sideways. You'll store the eggs just like you do chicken eggs. You want the small end pointed down. This goes down, this stays up. And the reason being, just like a chicken egg, there's an air sac right in here that forms. And if you flip this thing end over end over end over end, or for that matter, store them, such as this one is, you can rupture this air sac one. And if you rupture the air sac, there won't be a hatch. Now, guineas can get away with that. I don't know why, but then again, they're going to hatch based on the number. They're just looking for numbers. With guinea hens setting, if you allow the guinea to set, the best way to find her is if there's a grown up pinch row or something that's like a pile of brush or something in the field. That's where they'll generally set. The male will escort the female to the nest. Not usually going all the way to the nest, but he escorts her to it. And that usually happens between 10 and 12 o'clock. Now, if they see you watching them or they think something else is watching them, they'll go all over hell and half of Georgia trying to throw you off. They don't want nobody to know where their nest is. So you got to be real smart with the nest. With guineas, they'll hatch out. They'll lay a clutch of 20 to 30 eggs. I mean, they lay massive clutches of eggs. And another thing with this, you don't want to store them in sawdust. It dries them out. But with the guineas, they're real good at hatching. Excellent. They're like a Muscovy. Unfortunately, like a Muscovy, even though they can hatch a lot, they're pretty bad mothers. Guineas are the first birds to get out and move. And, the early bird gets the worm kind of deal. Problem is when the keats are hatched, and they're called keats, not chicks. When the little keats are hatched out, they are very, very susceptible to cold and dampness. And if they get the least little bit cold or they get the least little bit damp, they're dead. They're not very hardy when they're young, not until the first feathers come out. Once the first feathers come out, then they're pretty tough birds. But it takes those first feathers in order for them to remain hardy. So really, you're better off to take the keats and raise them up yourself, steal them from the mama. But now guineas, if there's a pack of them, you fight the whole pack. You don't buy one. So when they've got keats with them, they're pretty aggressive. We just recently had, I don't know, I think there's 10 or 11 guineas run together, and they hatched out about 20 keats, and we took them all from them except 4 or 5. And by the next morning, those 4 or 5 were dead. They'll run off and leave them. If they can't keep up, they drag them through the damn grass, and they don't live long. Now, getting back to the egg, if you're going to incubate the egg, put it in the incubator. Guineas hatch 26 to 28 days. And once they hatch, I leave them usually for a day or a day, sometimes 2 days, but usually a day in there. Now, there's a little trick. Right before they hatch, you get to say the 24th, 25th day. You can take them and quickly dip them in some more water and then lay them in there to hatch, and that'll help soften the shell. I hardly ever do this. I mean, I want the hardiest of the guineas to come out. I'm not sure about the temperature on a still air incubator, because I briefly used a still air back when I first started once. Still air does do better for waterfowl, but all the other eggs, you're better off with a circulated air, in which case it's 99.5 degrees. And like I say, do not ever store any egg like this, if it'll show up. Like that. You store an egg like that, your chances of hatching go down to very, very low. Store them small end down, and you can wash them or you can not wash them. They're like a chicken egg or any other egg. If you wash them, the temperature has to be between 102 to 108 degrees. At that temperature, the pores on the egg still shut. Anything more than that, you cook them. Anything less than that, the pores don't close up and the bacteria get into the egg. I seldom if ever wash mine. I used to, back when we had a hatchery, I washed everything. But I don't wash them now. So the bottom line is, keep it clean. You don't want sick birds, and you sure don't want to be sick yourself. Now with guineas, just like with pheasants or quail, you need what's called a drown-proof water. This is not a drown-proof water. It's a shallow water will be. If they get in the water and they get wet, brooder or no brooder, they're going to probably die. This is a drown-proof base. This is a drown-proof base. You can see if this thing don't go wild, and that's not it. You can see how shallow. This is a normal water. This is a drown-proof base. You can see right there. I also don't recommend these feeders. If you use these feeders, take the jar off. If they crawl in that feeder, they're food. Because guineas are very, very carnivorous. This is a good brooder. I used to sell a ton of, good water. I used to sell a ton of waters. This is a good feeder. I don't sell any now, but there's a lot of good places that you can buy them from. I used to be a distributor for Cool. Cool makes some really good stuff. So, and now when it comes to feed, guineas are not poultry. This is a water, but you don't want guineas around that. When it comes to feed, you want a high protein feed, a game bird starter, not a chick starter. You can raise them on a chick starter if it's unmedicated. If it's medicated, it'll build up a toxicity in their system. Not always, but a lot of times. and you don't want that. Don't raise guinea or anything with a duck. Ducks will smother them, and ducks are just nasty. But getting back to the brooder, another thing of raising on a wire, guineas, even as adults, they like to overcrowd each other, especially if they're scared, or for that matter, they just seem to be hogs with their space. And they will smother each other to death with wire floor brooder. They're less likely to do that because they're always going to be able to breathe. So you want a wire floor. Once you incubate them and they come out, I used to use commercial type brooders. Uh, I used a huge stack unit. That's the way they come from the factory. What I do not recommend is something like this. You see a lot of this when you go to farm stores that's selling chicks. This is the kind of unit I used, only mine was about 6 stack. But I use that mostly for quail. I wouldn't recommend building anything for quail because quail, they're just, you need to use a red light with a bob white. If it's Pharaoh, Praetornix, you're fine. They're not that mean. But bob white, Mexican speckled, etc., all those valley quail, gamble quail, those are very aggressive, so use a red light. But we're going to go back to guineas. I'm getting sidetracked. You see this happen a lot in, you go to a big box feed store like Rural King or Tractor Supply, and they're going to use this right here. There's a good chance that they're going to eat some of those shavings. And if they eat some of those shavings, it's going to stop them up and constipate them. And you're going to lose the bird. They're just, all my brooders that I've hand built have wire bottoms and they have drop trays. You don't want to leave a lot of air space because you don't want a lot of cool air coming up in there. That would be what I would call more of a grow off pen than a brooder, because you can't keep a constant source of heat. I use something like this, and I use a 100-watt light bulb. I don't use a heat lamp because I've got plastic drop trays. And with plastic drop trays, or if you use some kind of shavings, you use a brood lamp. I've known people to burn their whole barns or wherever they've got them down. It'll set fire to them as it mounts them and heats them up. But a wood floor with a good drop tray and a 100-watt light bulb and completely enclosed, you have to have some air ventilation, but very little. Now with guineas can cause a stuff called aspergillosis, and I'm probably saying that wrong. But it's a lung condition, and their droppings are dry, and a lot of times they have spores and funguses, and that's one of the few diseases you can actually catch, and it's as bad as cancer if you do. If you breed guinea, and I couldn't find a good picture of the pens like we used to use for aviaries. With guineas, some males, not all. Because remember, these are birds that breed one male to one female for a season. You want the pen longer than it is wide. That's the first thing. And back when I raised all those, I think my average pen was about 5 foot wide and 10 to 14 feet long. You find a male that will breed more than one female, and never put more than 4 or 5 females in there, because sperm count's going to drop and your fertility's going to drop. Collect your eggs every day, and you don't have to stare at them, but learn each bird. I don't care what kind of bird you're raising. Learn each bird. I found this picture here on there, and it's a big old snake, and all these guineas are around it. As I said before, when we had all those guineas we bred, We never had Japanese beetles. We didn't have no ticks, and we didn't have no snakes. I've watched them circle a snake like this before and attack. And they will continue till either the snake leaves or they'll eat it. They'll kill it and they'll eat it. They're quick, they're fast, they're accurate. Uh, I used to sell a lot of guineas to people that had tobacco. They go through, put them in there when the tobacco was young. And they would pick the tobacco worms off and never hurt. People that had big gardens or big tomato patches, tomato fields, they would, buy 20, 30 of them just to turn loose on the tomato fields or their garden, because they hardly ever will eat any of the fruit, but they'll eat every bug that comes to it. I mean, they're really a handy bird to have. As far as noisy, they're not noisy unless they're startled. When they roost in a tree at night, they get a little noisy because each one, they will call out. And it's almost like a check-in system, or like a, not John Boy, they holler until each one of them checks in. Once they've all checked in, then the hollering quits, unless you get a prowler or a predator, and then they're going to start all over again, which is a good thing. They'll roost towards the outer parts of a tree limb, and that's a protection thing in case a possum or a coon climbs a tree. Unfortunately, it's also a negative thing when owls come along, or hogs, which hogs not at nighttime, but owls do. And they'll face opposing directions. I've watched even my donkeys do this. They face opposing directions. And when one hollers, they all holler. And they'll sound the alarm, and you'll hear them, and they'll go plumb wild. That's when you know you either got a prowler or a predator. So they're an excellent alarm system. You also can't add a strange guinea. Guineas do not like anything strange, especially another guinea. I don't recommend buying full-grown guineas, but if you do, keep them up for a few months. Then turn them loose right before dark and chase them into a tree. You'll stand a better chance of keeping them that way. I found a new respect back then for guineas. My wife's worst fear is that I'll go into open another hatchery, which that's not going to happen. I've not got the health for it. We had about 3,500 breeders back then. I forget how many types of quail we had, or the pheasants. She hated the turkeys. I love my turkeys. Turkeys are also fun, but you raise your guineas not in the poultry classification. As I said before, I classified everything in 3 groups: poultry, game birds, waterfowl. And with the game birds, you're going to have pheasants, you're going to have turkeys, you're going to have peafowl, and you're going to have guinea fowl, and quail, and chuckers. Their dietary needs are more stringent, because they're going to need more protein. Their pen shapes are similar, but the pen shape, really where you keep them and where you brood them, to them, length versus width. You need something longer. And if it's a breeding pen and you got pheasants, for instance, you need something to block the view in case they go aggressive to each other. Once they get out of that testosterone level, it'll hit, and then once it passes, everything's fine. But the birds that's in the cage with them, they have to have somewhere to go. So I used to cut down little cedar trees and throw in with them. But anyway, that's guineas. And so now you know how to sex them, you know how to incubate them and raise them. And I think, if you do that, you're going, oh, But incubator wise, this is what we use. I sold a lot, and I personally endorse them. It's a GQF incubators. They make a good little incubator. This, however, is a sportsman. What you're looking at is actually Morans and a Araconda that had not exactly a glamour shot, but there's inside of one of our brooders. And as you can tell, they're Morans and one little lavender guinea heat. Never catch a guinea and hold it by its legs. Its legs are very delicate. Hold it instead like a pheasant by its wings. It's funny how one little thing can lead to another. A Lymes tick is what started me raising guineas. Up until that point, I hated them. And I knew that this one little bitty bug would cause all this grief and would cause me to get into a new hobby that turned into a business for a while and a passion for life. It led to me learning how to program and build a website. And it's provided a lot of information, I've learned about a lot of stuff that as a child, I didn't know. And as a youth, I didn't really care but to know. But it led to plenty of things. And unfortunately, it also led to the beginning of my health problems. We live in a neighborhood that has Lyme tick disease problems. I don't know why the neighbors, everybody wouldn't get together in that neighborhood and buy some guinea fowl and just turn them loose. Because guineas really, in my opinion now, are worth the investment. It's kind of like good food. If you think eating right is expensive, try sitting in a chemo chair or laying on a radiation table. I've done both. And so if you think guineas are expensive or guineas are a nuisance, try being medicated for a year and watching your body collapse. Hope you've enjoyed it and learned something on it.